Welcome to the Atheist Podcast. I'm Erin.
And I'm Kelley. Atheist is where we will explore American cultural trends through the lenses of a devout theist
and a devout atheist. We will discuss the messiness of being human,
the latest in social science, psychology, and American culture,
and what any of it has to do with Homo sapiens' longtime preoccupation with religion.
Hey, Erin.
Hey, Kelley. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing okay. But I am really excited about our conversation today with Wendy Solganik. Did I pronounce that right, Wendy?
You got it perfectly.
Oh, good. Okay. Wendy Solganik, who I have just met kind of vicariously through a class that I'm taking of hers. And I asked her to be on this because I think she's pretty phenomenal. And I think she has a lot of things to offer us today. So I want to tell you a little bit about Wendy, and then we're going to chat. So Wendy is the proprietor of a website called Willa Wanders, and she has all kinds of art classes that she teaches, that she offers through her website. All kinds of resources for artists, all different kinds of classes in watercolor and journal making and print lettering and mixed media, all different kinds of things. I mean, it's just a veritable smorgasbord of cool creativity classes. But also, Wendy has a really interesting kind of background in how she's come to this. So I want kind of her to tell us a little bit about her background. And then the class that I'll tell you a little bit, the class that I'm taking that I started with the bug that I was bit by, she teaches a watercolor for relaxation. And it's been awesome. And I'm super excited I found it. I'm really excited for you to kind of get to know what she does and for us to talk about the importance of creativity and art making. So welcome, Wendy. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I feel like I'm about to have a therapy session.
Well, maybe it's a little therapy for all of us. It's a little group therapy. I love it. So awesome. do you want to, so tell us a little bit about kind of your background and kind of where you've come from, where do you live now? And, how did you get to kind of where you are as a businesswoman and an artist?
As a human?
As a human.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
As a human. So I'm going to start with sort of the end point and then go back to the beginning, because I feel like we probably have something in common, the three of us, which is we tend to think a lot and be maybe even overthinkers.
Yeah, I think that's probably accurate.
Yeah. And I can't change myself. Like I can't stop from being inquisitive and curious and wanting to know about the world and all of those things. And I just think that maybe that level of thinking has gotten me maybe a little to a place where I suffer from some anxiety. Mm. And that's how I ended up really falling in love with making art for yourself. Mm. You know, not making art because you're trying to send other people a message about the world, but just making art using your hands because it calms the nervous system. So I'll go back to the long story of how I got there, but that's why I do what I do. That's why I have the platform that I have. That's why I bring other teachers on, because I just want to calm my own nervous system in this crazy world, and making things with your hands is a miracle. Like it really does calm your nervous system.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so grounding. Anything that's so tactile like that, it just brings you to like a centered place, you know?
It stops my thinking mind is really a lot of, I think, why it's so magical, because while I'm in flow state with making, it's like all of the anxiety that I have, it just shuts off completely. And it's like guaranteed. It's like if I open up my watercolor journal and I start just painting basic shapes, it stops all the overthinking and I can relax and I can do it for hours. And then that relaxation effect lasts for many hours after that. But that I don't want to obviously not going to only talk about that. So I know you guys asked me about how I got to this place. So I think I've always known that I was crafty and artsy for sure. I mean, that's absolutely for sure. I was a very crafty kid, but I grew up on the East Coast of the United States, and there was a lot of pressure to achieve, to go to a really good college. And
where did you grow up?
I grew up in Parsippany, New Jersey.
Okay. I grew up in Connecticut, so we were tri-state kids.
Okay, so where in Connecticut?
Fairfield County in Wilton.
Okay. Wilton Stationers, that was one of my customers when I owned a stationery shop. So, or a stationery manufacturing company. Okay, so you know the pressure. You know that East Coast pressure. So I didn't know anything else, and I ended up going to Cornell University, and I studied policy analysis, which was economics and government. And then my parents really wanted me to go to graduate school. They wanted all their children to not only get college degrees but they wanted them to get graduate degrees. And I didn't know what else to do. I was young, I was impressionable. Your parents have a huge influence on you. And I ended up in law school. And in my first week in law school, I knew that I had made a terrible mistake. I was not actually interested in quote unquote the law at all. Yeah. And I felt very, very stuck. And I didn't have any self-confidence that I could just walk away. I didn't know how to support myself. I didn't know what to do. And I ended up actually kind of getting physically ill. And I got irritable bowel syndrome, which maybe I never thought about this until right this second, but maybe I needed to get sick. Because if I hadn't gotten physically ill, I don't know that I would have done what I did next. So I got physically ill and I was like, oh, this is some kind of a sign.
Yeah.
Like that I shouldn't be here. And I went to my parents and I was like, you guys, I'm miserable. I don't want to be here. I really just want to take a year off and try to figure things out. And so because I got physically sick, they said, yes, you can do this. And they supported me emotionally in taking a year off. And I said, I'm going to get a job at a law firm and I'm going to really figure out if this is or is not the career for me. And I'll just, I'll just try to figure it out. And
our bodies respond. I mean, right? I mean, your body was telling you something.
Oh, my body was telling me something. Absolutely. I mean, I was just in the wrong place for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the first thing I did when that first year of classes was over, well, I got a job. I lined up a job for myself to work at a really big law firm in LA. So I could see like, maybe I didn't like law school, but maybe I would like the practice of law. So I got like a good job. But the first thing I did is I thought, I want to go learn how to make pottery on a wheel. And I found a pottery studio that was not far at all from where I was living. And I signed up for a pottery class on Saturday mornings. And I went and I started working and I worked, Monday through Friday. And I started making pottery on the weekend and I fell madly in love with it. And I thought, oh my God.
Like most lawyers do.
Like most lawyers do, right. And it was like, I knew it. I knew that I was not going to be a lawyer, that it was a terrible, that it was a bad mistake, but I didn't know what to do because I was like, how am I going to support myself? How am I going to make a life out of this? And I ended up just making pottery every spare minute that I had while I was working at this law firm. And then when the year was over, I didn't know what to do because I was like, I can't, it's like, I can't make a living doing this. I guess I have to go back to law school because at least if I'm in law school, my parents will pay my rent and my food bills and I'll just go back and I'll just, I'll graduate. I won't ever regret that I, quit. I won't be a quitter. But I cooked up a plan. I said, okay, I know I want to be an artist. I don't think I'll ever be able to support myself doing this. So I have to find a man.
The MRS degree.
I have to get married. That's what I cooked up a plan, and I did. I very shortly after that year off. It was only October, so I took the year off. I went back to school in September, and by October, I had found the man.
I love it. I love it.
And I told him, I was very, very honest with him. I was, look, here's the deal. I'm in law school, but I don't want to be here. I really just want to be an artist and a potter. And I'm looking to get married because I need that partnership so I could do this. And amazingly, he was like, okay, that's cool. I'm into that. Like, I have a job. I've got a solid job. This sounds reasonable. We like each other. This is a good match.
That's awesome.
I love how just like upfront and just practical that is.
It was very practical, and
create the life you want.
We came from very similar backgrounds. It was just a good match. We really liked each other, and I really liked his parents. He really liked my parents. Like, it was good. It was good. It's been working out so far. We've been married for 28 years. We have 3 kids. We're very happy together. I got very lucky. And awesome. He was fully supportive. He gave me a credit card. I got to buy all the art supplies I ever wanted. It just worked out really well. And I did graduate from law school. And then when that was over, I didn't even take the bar exam. I was like, I can't even study for this. This is awful. And I thought, I'll become a mom. I'll have kids. I'll make art. I never thought I would have a career. And everything just, things happened that I never could have imagined would happen. And I don't know which parts of the story you want to hear or whatever. So why don't you guys ask me a question?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, I just love that is like, that's the epitome of kind of a feminist story, right? Because you chose the life you wanted and even in, we don't have to have it all, or, have this big power job and a family. You can choose. As women, we can say, I want to do this. And that's, I love that.
So that is a very good topic of conversation, because my story does have a significant part of it where I was a mom and I worked full-time outside of the home. So I did end up, shortly after I became a mom for the first time, I started a business with a woman who was very, very entrepreneurial. And I was not entrepreneurial at the time and never thought I would own my own business. But she saw something in me and she was like, I'm entrepreneurial. I want to start a business. I think you'd be a good person for me to start a business with. Yeah. And it wasn't necessarily something that I would have chosen, but I did end up, like, even though I wanted to be the stay-at-home mom artist whose husband supported her, that is not at all how my story ended up unfolding. I ended up starting a business when I had a 1-year-old that I then operated for the next 15 years.
Wow.
And the idea that you can be everything, like you can be a mother, you can have a career, it was very hard on me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I did have a lot of help. Like I ended up having to hire an assistant who helped me with my life, like not even an assistant at work. I had a life assistant who was wonderful. She did all my grocery shopping. She picked my kids up from school. She drove my kids to school. She came into my house every day and cleaned it up. She did all the laundry. Like, I couldn't manage being the full-time career woman and the full-time mom.
Yeah.
And I had to say, like, look, if I'm going to be a career person, I'm going to have help in the home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that worked for a while, but it didn't work forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I hear that. I feel like, in our house, both people are working. There's kids running around all the time, like trying to just get people from where they need to go from point A to point B, and like get, it's hard. It's really hard. And without help, I mean, we, when our youngest was really little, we had a nanny, which was a huge, because she could help with a lot of those things. And then, as our kids have all gotten into school, it's like they're at school, which is helpful, but like there's just, you don't have that same level of support, it's really hard.
Yeah.
It's complicated. Living in the world today is a complicated thing.
And you don't have that, like, so actually I was just, a friend of mine from college, I was just kind of catching up with her, and she's got a kind of an interesting story. Like, she started a company that, in Africa, and it was basically to empower women there they were shoemakers, and they got to have an ownership stake in the company, and they were like paid good wages. And she was kind of sharing about how she's lived all over the world and kind of addressing the contemporary loneliness epidemic. But she was like, part of the way that we're living now is just so not the way like that happy people live all over the world. Like they live in community, and instead it's like we have all these people who are isolated, and then the parents are like the primary caregivers, but where you used to be in like a community of people that would help support each other. It wasn't just only these like two adult humans, trying to tackle everything.
This feels very messed up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The way that we live in the United States. I can't explain how other people live, but the way that we're living here feels really messed up to me, having lived through it. It does not feel like it's like too much for two parents to be working full time outside the home and having children without extended family around. And we did end up moving to where my husband's family lives, and his parents were very helpful, but not on a daily basis. Like they helped out once a week, which was wonderful. But it's different. Like if you're living in a multi-generational home, that would have been much, much, much better for everyone's mental health.
Well, and there we go, right? So we live in this kind of anxiety-producing culture.
Yes.
This kind of, and this very achievement-based culture, right? We're always trying to like achieve and get somewhere. And then in all the din of like social media and kind of content, here you come with this, with these classes that your real message is about creating, like that creativity is key to being human, which I think, I think that's kind of like, that's a radical idea, right? That just to create for yourself. So how did that discovery happen for you?
Okay. So like I mentioned, when I was a little kid, I was constantly creating. And I had no idea why. I just knew I loved it. And then when I was in 7th grade, I remember being in home economics, and we had to learn how to sew, and I loved it. And I got an A in the class, and I was just like, I was so happy cutting fabric and patterns and sewing and all this stuff. But there really isn't, an emphasis anywhere on, if you like working with your hands and making stuff, that's a totally legitimate thing you can do.
Right.
But somehow the universe, is there a God? Is there some master plan? Whatever. Like whatever is in control, whatever created me, knew somehow that it had to like get me back into creativity. And I ended up owning that business for 15 years where we were making things with our hands. So it was a custom stationery company where we designed and manufactured with our hands really high-end invitations and announcements. And so I worked with my hands a lot. It wasn't all me, I wasn't producing everything. There was a whole team of people. So in some ways I was more like supervising other people working with their hands.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew that I was happiest when I was in the production room actually assembling the cards.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I knew that about myself. And when I left that business, so I retired out of that business after 15 years, primarily because I needed to be home with my kids. It was, my nervous system was so jacked up by the end of those 15 years that I thought I was going to die. So I was like, I
And
can't do this anymore.
what was it that like was about the business that felt so stressful, or was it like that you're just being pulled in so many directions,
Yeah,
or
it's just the grind, the pressure, the customers. It was a very demanding psychological job. We had to constantly create new designs for the market. We had to deal with all of these high-end customers who are very, very demanding. And like in any business, you're going to have a certain amount of things that go wrong. So as hard as you
yeah,
try for everything to go right, occasionally a job goes wrong. And when something would go wrong, it was just very, very stressful.
Mhm.
And then there was the whole changing dynamic that the internet brought to the industry that I was working in. So there was a lot changing, and it was very difficult for us to roll with those changes. As much as we tried, and we did try to roll with those changes, like we tried to put our whole business online. And then instead of being a manufacturer and a designer of stationery, suddenly we were having to learn about how to be an online retailer and how
yep,
to do search engine optimization and
uh-huh.
online advertising and things that someone who's crafty like does not want to worry about.
It's a
Right.
totally different, yeah, yep,
Yeah, it was like the business had changed over the time that I was in it. And by the end, I actually was like, I don't think we can compete in the new world of this.
Mhm.
And I don't have the energy to figure out how to be something that I'm not.
Mhm.
And I'm not with my kids. And I want to be at home with them. And I can't fix the business at this point. And I was just like, I need, like, for my own sanity and my own nervous system, I need to get out.
yeah,
Mhm. You know, I've Erin and I have both been educators, and one of the things that I realized kind of later in my career was when we're educating kids, we're constantly just trying to like, pump them full of information, and like we want them to be successful, do the best, like, the message that your parents had for you. And yet what I realize is that kids will only rise to the level of their nervous systems. We all will, right? All of us. We really only go to the place that our nervous system can handle. So it's less important that we like, or we have to like switch this idea of success to like to be really like, what is the best for me that matches my nervous system?
I never thought of it, but you are 100% right.
Because it's, we can have these kind of dreams as a kid, but if and I've told this story before. I was a theater teacher for 25 years, and I was an originally I was going to be an actor, and I had been at grad school. I got my MFA, studied for 3 years, went to my first audition in Chicago, and I just absolutely like went up on my lines. I had to walk off the stage. I just totally choked. And then I didn't act for another 5 years after that. And I realized that even though I was so well trained, I did not have a nervous system that could handle that pressure. And so it didn't matter how well trained I was, right? Um, so teaching was a much better fit for my nervous system than having to make uh, my job, make my, pay my bills, put food on the table, be dependent on whether I could get a job or not as an actor. Like I just couldn't do it.
This
yeah.
makes a ton of sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is why when I first heard you in the class say, we're just doing this for ourselves. We are just creating for ourselves, not for anything else. Like that is something, like if you are an artist and you've been trained to be an artist, like you have to unlearn that over and over again. Like the creativity for creativity's sake. This is not like I don't have to produce something. And so that's why I just fell so in love with the class.
So
Yeah.
I think because I had gone through that experience when I was in my early 20s of having to ask myself, like, Wendy, who are you? What do you want? And I was like, I know I want to make things with my hands.
Mm-hmm.
And then having to say, okay, well, what is the right fit for me? At the time, making things with my hands looked like, okay, painting or drawing or making pottery, and then trying to sell that to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew just from hanging around that world, the little bit that I did, that I didn't know to put it in the words you're putting it in. But now that you're saying it wasn't a match for my nervous system, I'm going to forevermore use that terminology. I knew that trying to be an exhibiting artist was not going to be a match for my nervous system. I had done a few sales and it was fun and it was cool and it was very like low stress. But to really make a living at something and really like know that you're going to be able to support yourself, you have to operate at like a very different level of wanting to put yourself in front of other human beings and be judged by them of whether they like your art or not.
Yeah.
And on some level, I knew that was going to be too much for my nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that was why I cooked up the marriage plan. Because I was like, I know I have to create. That's who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think, I'm thinking about like at the very beginning, you were talking about just the concept of like the flow state and, the book, Stolen Photo. Well, yeah, Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi is that's the guy that, kind of popularized, or he was the scientist that like discovered flow state, right?
Yeah.
But it was Johann Hari's book, Stolen Focus, where he's like writing about, I'm pretty sure it's that book, where he's like writing about his background. So Csikszentmihalyi was a kid in like World War II, his like really tragic family story. I think he was like, and he was dispersed from his homeland, right? Like family members are dead. Everybody has lost everything. Everything is very stressful, right? And then he finds chess, is I believe, or like he's like playing a game, and he's able to like focus on chess, and like everything else felt calm, right?
Yep.
And so it's like the power of that. And in the book, the thesis that Hari is trying to put forward, right, is like so much of our like well-being is being hindered, or is being impacted by like this really fractured information environment of like that we have too much information that's like being pumped at us all the time. We feel very like fragmented and frazzled, and like this thing that's really healthy for our like sense of being centered, right, feeling whole, is like we're like never capable of entering it, because we like are constantly being pulled out of any opportunity for flow state, because we get a notification or whatever, right? There's just like too much things clawing at our attention all the time. And so, I wonder, like, it's like I feel like what you're doing is trying to create a space for people in this environment where like nobody is able to find it unless you carve it out. Like you can't, like, how do you find it?
Right. You do have to carve it out. So it's interesting what you're saying. When I started my business, I wasn't thinking I'm starting this new business and this is going to all be about flow state. That is not how it started.
Yeah.
Really just started because I had left my other company after 15 years. I spent a little bit of time sort of like looking for what I was going to do with my new spare time, because now all of a sudden I did have some free time. My kids were actually old enough that I had some space, and I returned to where I had sort of left off 15 years before, or even more than that, with, oh, I used to love taking art classes. Like that's how this whole thing started. I took a pottery class. I fell in love with it. I ended up taking painting and drawing and lettering and bookmaking and all of these classes. And I was so happy when I was in those art classes. And I thought, you know what? There's a whole new world that has developed while I've been sitting there making greeting cards for 15 years, there's now this world of online art classes. Like everything that I used to love doing, the lettering, the watercolor painting, the bookmaking, everything, it's all easily accessible now from your home.
Yeah.
And I just was like, wow, this is so incredibly fun, incredibly therapeutic. I can make art and I don't have to have some higher reason. Like I'm not trying to make it to sell to anyone. Although I did go through a period of thinking, am I supposed to be like trying to sell this to people? I did go through that.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to really figure out what I was doing it for. And when I was figuring it out, I came up to this place where I realized that my greatest sense of well-being came when I combined two things. Thing number one is just making art. And thing number two was listening to a podcast episode or a book on Audible. If I could make art and just listen to people have intelligent conversation, I was transported and I was just like in bliss for hours and hours and hours. And so I thought, okay, I'm onto something here. This is what I want, like me, uniquely me. This might not be for everyone, but this is what I need in my life. I'm going to stick with this for as long as I can. And I just started just doing that. And then because I was combining that with posting what I was making on Instagram, that was why I ended up sort of turning it into something that is a business, because that social media that has all of the downsides, it also has all of the upsides of connecting people with other people that have similar interests.
Yeah. That's
So
the best part of it, right? I mean,
that is the best part of it.
Is. Yeah.
So I was posting what I was making and I was getting very, very positive feedback, and getting that positive feedback and people started asking me, well, when are you going to teach a class? And I was just thinking the whole time, I'm just going to be a perpetual student. Like, why would I ever even try to teach a class? There's thousands of art classes already out there. And then COVID happened. And I was like, I'm not doing anything else, really. Maybe I should try to actually film something with my phone.
So you've only been doing this since COVID?
Yeah.
Wow.
This thing. I mean, I've done, I've done other things, but this particular thing, I started taking art classes online before COVID, but it was COVID when I filmed my first class to sell. And it sold so well that I was like, oh, that's a sign.
Yeah.
That's a sign that people want this. It may be out there, but maybe there's something about me. Maybe there's something about my background with design and art that, I have been developing for a lifetime. Maybe there's something about the way I teach this that people are really responding well to. And that was sort of the beginning of it. And then it developed from there.
Yeah. Well, I can say, I can tell you. So when I found you, I think it's like, I've only been taking a class for like 2 weeks, but I was so taken with it and I so needed it. So I think I told you I've been down with my mom who's been in hospice. And so I was living with my parents, which is, already kind of, can be a stressful thing. And then I was with my mom as she's very ill. And in the space, my parents listen to the television very loud at all times. There's like never any quiet. And I knew my nervous system with like a 24/7 news cycle that was probably going to be on and all this stuff. My nervous system was going to go crazy. And I had brought my knitting with me, which I taught myself to knit on YouTube 20 years ago also. So online learning. And I brought like some books, but like the knitting was too complicated for me to kind of find flow in that space. And I just had this immediate visceral need to make something with my hands that was going to put me in flow state. And it was going to be a very specific flow state because I had all this kind of chaos around me. And I went to Michael's and I just bought like markers and I started like doodling, and I was watching like doodle videos on Instagram and stuff and kind of trying to learn some things. And then I came upon your class and I was like, watercolor for relaxation. I was like, oh, this is what I need. So
Wow.
I started it, and immediately like that, like it would have been good, like it would have been fine, you know, like watercoloring was great, but it was also like the invitation that you offer to just to be in, you explain what flow state is, you kind of explain why it's important, and then you just have this such a great personality and a great kind of like it just felt, if I just felt like, oh, I just want to, you know. And I also, there was also something about taking an art class kind of asynchronously, not being graded on it, not kind of having like a, like an art guru that you feel like you're going to be judged by, right? It was just so open and welcoming. Your demeanor is. And so it was just kind of really exactly what I needed. And I'm gonna keep taking classes. But
Well, I hope that you keep just paint. I mean, of course, I want people to take many classes, but the thing about watercolor for relaxation, which to me makes it such a special course, is because once you get the basic technique down, it's something that you can just do over and over and over, like knitting. Like you don't ever have to stop, and it just become part of what you do.
Yeah.
You can fill up journal after journal after journal. And there is something so soothing about putting that paintbrush into the water and into the pigment, and then brushing that onto the paper and filling the shapes. And it's so satisfying as it comes together, and the color mixing. I mean, it just has every element of being not too difficult, but a little bit challenging that puts people into flow state.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's yeah. I like, I can't imagine. Yeah, it's just been awesome. And I have to tell you, my favorite moment so far was, there was a video, because a lot of the video is, it's very kind of almost like ASMR, like watching you paint too is very calming. And you're also just hilarious and funny. And when you were doing these like loose flowers and you were like, I don't know about this. And you're kind of, you know, you're also kind of self-deprecating as you kind of paint, like, oh, I messed that up or whatever. But then you got those, like, you finally put those little blue dots in like the center of these flowers.
I know what you're talking about.
And you start freaking out. You're like, oh, and I felt it, but I felt it like along with you. You were like, oh my God, that was it. It like, that makes it. And it was so satisfying. And it was like the colors and like the composition and it was glorious. I just laughed and laughed, and it was just.
So there is an element of doing this that is like a personal satisfaction, personally fun feeling of creating art. Like, again, even if nobody's going to see it, or you're only going to share it like on social media, it's satisfying as a human to create something that brings you joy. And it's like a human need.
Yeah. I think at least, you know, I was just thinking about, so we had a leak in our upstairs, like laundry room, and because of something with the roof or whatever. But so my wife was like, we've been looking at this spot on the ceiling, and we're like, do we need to hire somebody, whatever? And so she just started watching videos on YouTube. She's like, I think I can do this on my own, you know? And so she spent like days, like, you know, getting the stuff down and getting the whatever, like the plaster and the spackle, and like just do, you know, was like committed to it. And well, another one of our friends also, he's like the guru of like home projects. I mean, and you know, like he tuck pointed his entire house Like that was like his, which like but they were talking at work. Like she was sharing with him like that she was so excited about doing it, and it worked, right? And they're both doctors, and they're in the ER, they're ER doctors, so they're both in the ER, and they're like, oh my God, there's just something so calming about like having like doing these projects, that's part of why he does them, right? It's like he's like it's like the only time I feel like totally calm is like when I'm tuck pointing my house.
So there is some science. I'm not a scientist. I'm not, I don't know how to explain this other than to say it is backed by science that there are chemicals that are released in our body. Like our body releases chemicals that combat the stress hormone.
Mm-hmm.
And when we work with our hands and we touch the materials, our body releases the chemicals that combat the stress chemicals.
Yep.
And it's like all you have to do is try it once to know that it's happening and it's real. You feel your nervous system relaxing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'm not surprised that the doctors want to do the spackling. It's like once you start spackling, you're like, damn, I need more spackling in my life.
She's like, oh, I think there's another spot in the back. I'm going to do that one next. And then I'm going to this, it's like to take the pain off. Yeah. She's into it, but it's like folding laundry. She's like, no, that's not like getting me into a flow state. But these like other, where you're like, I don't know, just, it's a totally different vibe.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if the difference is something having to do with creation. Although with spackling, they're fixing something, but on some level, I don't know, because there's something about creation.
Well, and it's I think that's part of it's the problem solving, right? Like it's like and probably in the same way as like an artist, like the creation, like I don't know that you're like problem solving necessarily, but maybe you are. You're like, how do I create this in the way that I want this, right? And I think that's part of it is like, oh, it's not like mindless. Like that's what's different about like the flow state, right? It's not like a mindless activity. It's an activity that like absorbs your mind, in a way, and like directs that energy, that mental energy, where like folding laundry is just like, oh God, and you're still ruminating, right, on all the things. So it's not getting you to that state that is the one that actually like calms your nervous system.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's kind of the difference between, say, like a meditative state and a flow state are kind of different, right? Because you can fold laundry or wash dishes and be kind of in that meditative state, like just to do something kind of that's mindless and kind of clear your mind. But flow state, there needs to be a little pushback. Like there needs to be a little, like the difficulty level, right? That balance.
Yeah, you need to have a little bit of challenge. You're not going to go into flow state if something is easy for you. So if you're doing dishes, for most adults, I think that's pretty easy. Or even like folding laundry is pretty easy. You need a little bit of challenge. So they call it, again, I'm not a scientist, but it's called like the challenge skills balance.
Yeah.
You have to have a little bit of challenge, which again is why why the watercolor painting in particular, no matter how good of a watercolor painter someone is, no matter how many years they've been painting, it's going to be challenging to fill a shape in like as close to perfect as you can. Nobody needs to be perfect, but you're trying to fill that shape in. And so you have to like control the amount of water, the amount of pigment. You have to control your hand. There's always going to be some amount of challenge there. Even for me, I've done it for hundreds, maybe thousands of hours. Anytime I sit down to do it, it's always challenging me a little bit, but not too much. It's not too hard. That's the thing. If it's too hard, you won't go into flow state either.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's that perfect balance.
Yeah.
So do you have any, like, what has been your experience in these last, it's like 4 or 5 years you've been doing this with the Willa Wanders. Have you, what are the kind of some of the things that you've heard from people who have taken the class, who have kind of found this, like, what's been the kind of the response?
I mean, people, it's not just me trying to sell something to people saying, oh, this works for me. I'm pretending I think it's going to work for other people. Like in massive numbers, people are saying this works for them too.
Yeah.
So it's not that deep. It's not that complicated. People are just, the feedback is, oh, I feel it too. I feel calm.
Yeah.
I like doing this. Thank you so much. I'm going to keep doing this.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I love it.
Well, we would be remiss to not ask you about your podcast that you also have.
Yeah.
So can you tell us about that, like the show, why you decided to do it, the format, what kind of guests you bring on, that kind of stuff?
So the podcast is truly like, it started because I am a very curious person. I probably have ADHD. I've never been diagnosed with it. Do either of you guys feel like you have ADHD?
I don't think I do, but I'm pretty sure my wife does.
Does she have the hyper focus kind?
She can be hyper focused, but she's very like, it probably is hyper focused because it's like sometimes things seem like absent minded, but it's like it's actually she doesn't even see it. Like, like we're
so hyper focused on what she's
on something
about.
else. Yeah.
So I've always been someone who leans toward hyper focus, which is like, I don't think ADHD is necessarily a disability. It's a superpower.
Yeah.
The reason I've been very accomplished in my lifetime with multiple businesses is because I hyper focus. If I decide that I want to learn how to do something, I'm going to be the most focused a person could possibly be in learning how to do something.
Actually, we both, yes. I would say if that's how you're defining ADHD, Erin and I are there.
Okay.
I think we are enthusiasts. We are
enthusiasts.
Yeah.
So I'm like a huge enthusiast. So basically, when I started making art again after I, retired out of my other business, and I found that there was this whole world online and that maybe I actually could be a part of the entrepreneurial group of people in like, maybe you have thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of mixed media artists around the world, but only so many of them decide, oh, I want to like make a business out of this.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was like, oh, like I could apply all of my business knowledge from my previous careers to this, and I'm hyper focused on this because I'm just loving this whole mixed media art world. I want to start talking to other people about it. Like I was lonely, it kind of comes back to how we started. It's like, we live in a lonely world and we're not connected with people, and people who share my interests don't necessarily live in my neighborhood. Maybe they live 5 states away and I just want to have a conversation with them. So it was sort of like a combination of many different factors of, I want to have conversations. I want to learn more. I'm interested in people. I'm interested in their lives. I like to talk. Let me have a podcast. Maybe this will help market my new fledgling business.
Yeah.
All of it aligned. And it's an enormous undertaking to have a podcast. Like if people are listening to this and they don't understand, like it is such a huge time-sucking activity.
Yeah. It takes a lot.
It takes a lot. And at this point, I'm probably doing about 12 episodes per year. Okay. It's not that many because you guys know it takes a lot.
Yeah. So what's the name of the show? How do people find it?
It's called Show Up or Shut Up with Wendy Solganik. And it just means like show up and make art or shut up already. Stop complaining about how you're not making art. Just like go make something.
I love it. I love it.
And then we should also have you plug, just to tell people one more time about like where they can find your platform, the videos.
Yeah, everything is contained at Willa Wanders, WillaWanders willawanders.com. That will lead you to the podcast, the blog, the YouTube channel, all the online classes. It's all there at willawanders.com.
And we'll link that in the show notes too, so people can find it. Well, Wendy, this has been awesome. I want to read you this quote because you're also a good quote person too. I've started the lettering class that you do, and that you give us that it's like 3 pages of quotes of beautiful quotes, which you quote so many of my favorite people in there. But this I feel like kind of sums up what you've said today. And this is from one of my favorite writers. His name is Frederick Buechner. And he says, the place that God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. And that's what I feel like, you've really done that with how you've kind of shaped your life and what you found, because you really are using the things that you love so much and bringing such joy and really teaching people such an important skill and an important life, what it means to be human. And I really appreciate that.
That is such a beautiful quote.
It's a good one, right?
That's a good one. I love good quotes. I am as obsessed with good quotes as I am with watercolor for relaxation. Wow. They just blow me away. They just take my breath away.
Yeah. Well, he's got a lot of them. I'll send you this one.
Please send me them, because actually I'm about to start filming a course that won't release for another year. And it's all centered around the best advice you ever got.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
That's good.
Yeah. And well, I'll just spill the beans. So basically it's like creating a recipe box that someone would find after you die.
Oh, I love that.
And that they I don't know. I mean, you said your mother's in hospice. So my parents are both deceased, but one of the things that I have of my mother's is her recipe box. And it's like a direct connection that's just bigger than pretty much any other connection that I still have with her. Mm-hmm. Seeing her handwriting is incredible, and touching, this thing that I know she touched so many times and cooked from and all of that stuff. Anyway, so I thought of this idea of what if we created life recipes full of our favorite quotes and and the advice that maybe people gave us that we carried with us through our lives, or whatever it is that you want to pass on. So to say that I'm obsessed with good quotes, I know that not everybody loves quotes the way we love quotes, but come on, they're so good.
Yeah. I love that idea. I love that.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And the other thing is the thing that you're offering people, in the watercolor in all your classes, and that one that you're just describing too, is you're offering people really, it's what I would consider a spiritual practice. It becomes a practice, right? It becomes something that we do to kind of center ourselves, to remember, to reflect, to remember who we are, where we came from. And I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah. And I would say, sorry.
No,
Sorry,
tell me what you would say.
I would say it's just bringing us back to something that's fundamentally human, right? We have live in a world where we're completely disconnected from our bodies. That is our new environment is teaching us to forget our bodies. And your class is hey, remember you have a body? That's important. And if you're not connected to it, you're going to feel totally out of whack,
Yeah.
Well, that's a lot for me to chew on, because I don't think I'm the most connected to my body, because I live in my head. But I want to be more connected to my body. And I never thought about that.
I think that the physicality of the tactile, it is you are I mean, it's a way to get out of your head, right? But like I think part of what I think is going on is like that this environment that we're in, it like keeps us in our head all the time, right? And like it's anything that can kind of pull us out of that. But like I don't know that there's something that would pull us out of it that doesn't require like some kind of tactile, like something physical, you know?
Yeah. Like a yoga practice. You're saying like you'd be not in your head, you'd be in your body, an art practice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or like the doctor spackling their house, right? They're like doing something physical that's, you know, reminding them like, you know, I'm alive with a body.
With a body. I am a body. What is it? I am a soul. I have a body.
Right. Like Erin gets in flow state with running, and I so wish that I could get in flow state with running. I do not. I like to sit on my butt and grab some yarn and touch beautiful paper.
But it's the most, to me, it's like the most important thing that I do. Like if I, and it's the only, like, I won't sacrifice it, because if I don't do it, like, I'm not good at other things. Like, I'm not good at the rest of my life, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I get it. I too wish I was a runner. I wish that was what I connected with. I'd be an all around healthier person.
I hear you.
It's art. I can't help it. It's like art is my thing. Art is my thing.
Well, we're glad it's your thing, and the world needs your thing. And thanks for talking to us tonight. And I will see your hand soon.
All right. I really appreciate you guys bringing me on. It was a lovely conversation. It did not go in any direction I thought it was going to go in. I thought we were going to end up talking about politics and religion and all of that stuff and religious deconstruction. So, okay. Maybe in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, we can have you back
on.
Because we didn't really ask what your religious background. Do you have a religious background?
Oh boy, do I have a religious background. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I have a whole religious deconstruction story.
Oh man.
Seriously?
Yeah, I heard you mention that. Here, can you do the goodbyes and then we could keep talking?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll have to have you back on to talk about the religious deconstruction.
Absolutely.
Right.
You're booked.
I'm booked. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. A huge heartfelt thank you to all of our listeners. Some of you joined us a year ago, some of you joined us recently, but all of you are helping us grow the show. Thank you so much.
Atheist is still advertising free, sponsor free, and available for free to everyone. Lots of podcasts have big production teams. Our team is just 3 friends working together to make something we hope puts good into the world and brings value to your life.
But we always need your help. Please spread the word and share the show. All of our social links and other ways to support the show are available on atheistpodcast.com.
Atheist is produced by Justin Seiwell of Media STL. Thank you for listening, and keep looking for connection.